Resilience. The slowdown in economic activity in the primary and secondary sectors of the economy impact negatively on the financial sector.
The financial sector has had to deal with the low economic growth environment, political factors, ratings downgrade prospects and currency volatility adding to the uncertainty. Insurance companies have battled to sell more policies to hard-pressed consumers. The high unemployment rate and weak economic activity have led to banks being unable to get new business on the retail side, with an uptick in bad loans. South Africa also has averted a sovereign ratings downgrade this year, which has been a major highlight in the economy. Analysts say some of the biggest challenges the banking sector is facing are regulatory compliance.
Some of the challenges have been really around compliance. So the bank's compliance departments probably are one of the biggest departments in the banks, with the level of scrutiny by our regulators, since our regulators are very active in this market. And it really is going to be interesting to see how our regulation evolves as Twin Peaks becomes our reality. And there's a real concentration on our prudential and market conduct through the Twin Peaks setup.
Earlier in the year, major banks announced that they have closed the accounts of companies that are part of the Oak Bay Group controlled by the Gupta family.
So the international regulations, which are quite strict on who banks do business with, and the banks felt that in terms of all those rules and regulations and procedures, they were bound to close those accounts. So the matters obviously received a lot of publicity, and there's going to be further examination of all of this, but I think the bank's point of view is based on pretty firm foundations.
Zuma has referred the FICA bill back to Parliament, citing concerns about its constitutionality.
Bill is probably going to be signed in, just really around a greater emphasis on money laundering within the South African environment, as well as making sure that the regulation stays on par with international regulation. We have such a strong banking sector within South Africa and such a robust regulatory frame that, from a South African perspective, we are always trying to keep up with international standards so that we retain our reputation as being a strong banking environment.
Technology is expected to continue to play a big part in banks and insurers' ability to satisfy their customers.
That requires a lot of investment, particularly investment in technology. Not much good in having a whizzy mobile banking app if at the back end your systems are in disarray and it's very difficult to give people information about the status of their account or to reconcile your own books and records. So that is a real challenge for all of the financial services providers, how to reconcile the desire to make the front end a lot more attractive to the user, but at the same time to develop and in some cases replace very archaic or legacy systems.
2017 looks much more promising than this year. The economy looks set to grow at a much faster pace. Government still needs to avert a ratings downgrade to junk status. More positively, the drought affecting food price inflation looks like it's behind us.
I think it's pretty positive. If you look now towards the end of 2016, some of the big rocks or the big concerns that were there earlier in the year have kind of disappeared. Things like the sovereign downgrade, the political environment. Obviously, day to day, there's still a lot of intrigue as to how things are going to pan out. But it has felt a little more settled, perhaps, in the last few weeks than it was earlier in the year. And I think if you look at the financial services sector as a whole, there's a bit of stability now around interest rates, around inflation. So we have seen that uptick, as I said, in non-performing loans during the year. But I think there's cautiously optimistic sentiment as we move into 2017.
Internationally, the world economy should grow from 2.9% this year to about 3.1% next year. Not much more, but a little bit more. So our economic growth will probably grow from maybe as little as 0.4% this year to something over 1%, maybe between 1 and 1.4%. So that obviously would be good for the banks.
Analysts say some of the opportunities available for the financial sector is sharing best practices with other service providers on the continent to continue to compete with global standards. Financial inclusion is another opportunity to get the unbanked masses into the formal banking. Gloria Sifakomosi, SABC News, Johannesburg.
South Africans have plenty more to spend this holiday season.